Everyone thought I was an idiot, until I was the only one who could unlock my best friend's boyfriend's phone and go through his camera roll. At first, we thought it would just be photos of other girls, but turns out, he's an evil beast, so we ruined his life. I never learned how to read and write until I was 10, so sometimes when I'm typing I pretend to misspell things in a funny way to play it off. For example, asparagus turns into asparagus. I frequently smack myself in the head from opening the door too fast, and one time I even gave myself a concussion. But if there's something I'm good at, it's remembering people's birthdays, because I remember everyone's. The cashier from a store I used to live beside when I was 4, May 30th, 1999. The librarian who told me I had nothing going on behind the eyes when I was 11, March 19th, 1973. The girl from my high school who threw up on the field trip bus and never came back to school, October 9th, 2004. But unfortunately, this talent isn't enough to pull you through life. So I am currently 22, working 40 hours a week at a local Quick Check, with nothing but a nicotine addiction and a high school diploma. But luckily somehow, this story isn't just about a pity party, because it's a pity party with a happy ending. One day, out of nowhere, a girl came running in so fast that the door slammed against the shelf. Her face was so red and puffy that I could barely recognize who she was, and it wasn't until she started saying my name in between breaths that I figured it out. She was my ex-best friend from senior year. It's not like anything super bad happened between us. She just sort of forgot about me when she moved away for college. But I never stopped thinking about her. Lily didn't even say anything. She just plopped a phone down on the table and told me to unlock it. I was so confused that I couldn't even move. And that's when she told me the password was her boyfriend's grandmother's birthday. There was a sort of pleading look of desperation in her eyes, so I set aside the craving for an explanation and just put it in. Her little thumbs started moving around so fast you could have sworn they were on fire. Her eyes were glued to the screen. Well, the store was empty, so I figured that was my chance to figure out what was going on and take a peek over her shoulder. Based on the lock screen, I could tell it was her boyfriend's phone, and she was going through his camera roll. I don't know what I expected to see from here. Maybe the nudes of another girl, maybe a crazy intimacy tape, I don't know. But then she went into his hidden folder, and what we saw made my stomach turn. Photos of children, young children, in situations no child should ever be in. I jerked my head away immediately, feeling like I might throw up right there on the convenience store floor. My brain couldn't process what I'd just seen. It was like my mind kept trying to reset itself, refusing to accept what my eyes had just registered. Lily was full-on hyperventilating now, and my manager DP was giving us the stink eye from the register. DP's always been suspicious of anyone who spends more than 2 minutes in the store without buying something. Says it cuts into his precious profit margins. I grabbed Lily's arm and pulled her toward the back room before DP could come over and ask questions. "We need to get somewhere private," I whispered. She nodded, clutching the phone like it might explode. The break room was tiny, just a faded folding table with mismatched chairs and a mini fridge that constantly made this weird gurgling sound like it was slowly dying. Once we got to the employee break room, I shut the door and just stood there, trying to process what we'd just discovered. My mind kept blanking out, like it was trying to protect me from what I'd seen. Lily had to snap her fingers in front of my face multiple times. Tommy, focus, what do we do?" she kept saying. I shook my head to clear it and pulled out my phone. "We call the police, right now. This is serious shit, Lily." But she grabbed my wrist so hard her nails dug in. I'd never seen her like this before. Lily had always been the calm, collected one in high school, while I was the one constantly forgetting my homework or walking into door frames. Still do that sometimes, embarrassingly enough. "No, not yet. Wilder will know it was me who found it. You don't understand. He has a temper. She stopped, and I realized she wasn't just disgusted by what she'd found. She was scared for herself. That's when I noticed the faint yellowish bruise on her wrist, partially hidden by her sleeve. I took a deep breath. "Lily, those are children. We can't just ignore this." We went back and forth in hushed voices for a few minutes. I kept insisting we needed to call the cops immediately. She kept saying we needed to be careful about how we did this. My mind was racing through worst-case scenarios. What if Wilder came looking for his phone? What if he tracked it to Quick Check? What if DP walked in and saw what we were looking at? Eventually, we compromised. We'd document everything first, then report it. Neither of us wanted to look through those horrible images again, so I suggested just screenshotting the folder names and timestamps as evidence without actually opening the files. It seemed like a good plan in theory, but in practice it meant handling a phone that contained some of the most disturbing content imaginable. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. I tried calling my cousin Owen, who works as a police dispatcher, for advice, but he didn't pick up. Owen and I aren't super close these days, but he's always been the responsible one in the family, the guy everyone calls when they need actual adult advice. I left a vague but urgent voicemail asking him to call back as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Lily started carefully looking through Wilder's text messages to see if there was more evidence. She was moving through the phone like she was handling a bomb, scrolling with just the tip of her finger as if she didn't want to touch it more than necessary. Suddenly, the phone started ringing with an incoming call labeled simply, "Home." We both froze like deer in headlights. Wilder was looking for his phone. It was like one of those moments in a horror movie where the monster's footsteps are getting closer and you're hiding in a closet praying it doesn't find you. "Don't answer it," I whispered, but Lily was already panicking. "He'll track the location. He's got that Find My Phone thing. He'll know I have it." Her eyes were wide with genuine fear, and I realized she was terrified of this guy in a way that went beyond just what we'd discovered. Before I could stop her, she answered and put on this fake cheerful voice. Hey babe, yeah, sorry, I borrowed your phone to look up a recipe. My battery died. I'll bring it back soon, okay? Her voice was shaking so bad I was sure he'd notice, but somehow she convinced him she'd be home soon. When she hung up, we both just stared at each other. We had maybe an hour at most before he'd expect her back. The reality of our situation was sinking in fast. We were two barely adults with no real plan, holding evidence of serious crimes, and the clock was ticking. We decided to check one more folder labeled work to see if there was more evidence. What we found made everything even more complicated. Photos of Wilder at community events, with police officers, lots of them. Not just casual selfies, but friendly group shots where he had his arms around their shoulders, beers in hand, everyone smiling like old buddies. He's friends with cops, I said, stating the obvious. My heart sank even further, if that was possible. His Uncle Frank is a state trooper, Lily whispered. He brags about it all the time, says he can get out of any ticket. She twisted a strand of hair nervously, a habit I remembered from high school whenever she was stressed about a test. Great. So reporting to local police might be risky. We should go to the state police then, I suggested, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Frank is state police, she replied, looking more hopeless by the second. Of course he was. Just then, the break room door swung open, and my coworker Sassy walked in. Sassy's been working at Quick Check even longer than me, going on 6 years now. She's in her late 20s, has purple hair that somehow never seems to fade, and takes exactly zero crap from anyone, especially DP. She took one look at our faces and immediately knew something was wrong. You guys okay? When neither of us answered, she added, I can cover your shift if you need to bounce, Tommy. I've never been more grateful for Sassy's no questions asked attitude. She's the kind of person who will help you bury a body and never bring it up again, which, given our current situation, felt uncomfortably relevant. I thanked her and accepted the offer immediately. We needed to get somewhere safe to figure out our next steps. My car was in the shop though, so Lily suggested we go to her friend Frankie's apartment nearby. Frankie lived in one of those converted Victorian houses near campus that had been chopped up into tiny apartments with weird layouts and perpetually questionable plumbing. We were about to leave through the back door when Lily's phone started ringing. Wilder again. She answered on speaker so I could hear. Hey, beautiful. I was thinking we could go out for dinner later. That Italian place you like? His voice was so normal, so sweet. It made me feel sick knowing what we'd just found on his phone. The disconnect between his caring boyfriend tone and what we knew about him was jarring, like psychological whiplash. Lily managed to sound somewhat normal as she told him she'd text him later about dinner plans. I wondered how many times she'd had to fake being okay with him. We hurried to Frankie's apartment, which was thankfully only a few blocks away. Frankie answered the door in pajama pants and a tank top, clearly confused by our unexpected visit. She was a tall girl with a sleeve of colorful tattoos and short blonde hair that stuck up in every direction. I'd met her a couple times when she and Lily were still in high school, but we'd never really talked much. Frankie was understandably reluctant when we tried explaining the situation. I don't want to get involved in relationship drama, she started, but I cut her off. It's not drama, it's a crime, a serious one. I showed her just one of the folder names. I didn't want to traumatize another person with the actual contents. Her expression changed immediately. Holy shit, she whispered. What do we do? That was the million-dollar question. None of us knew exactly how to handle this. We were just a bunch of young adults who barely knew how to file taxes or remember to get oil changes. Suddenly dealing with something so dark and serious, it felt like we'd stepped into an episode of Law and Order. Frankie suggested contacting a child advocacy center instead of going directly to police, but none of us knew how to do that. She started researching options on her laptop while Lily and I paced around her living room. The apartment was tiny but cozy, with string lights hanging across the ceiling and movie posters covering most of the walls. It would have been a nice place to hang out under literally any other circumstances. Finally, Owen called me back. I put him on speaker and explained the situation as calmly as I could. If this guy has connections in law enforcement, you need to be strategic, he warned. Document everything properly before making a formal report. He had this authoritative tone that reminded me of when we were kids, and he'd explain the proper way to build a fort or ride a bike. Owen recommended we use an anonymous reporting hotline, but Lily worried that wouldn't be enough to get immediate action. Then she dropped another bombshell. I've seen him do suspicious things before, she admitted quietly. He volunteers as a photographer at youth sports events. I thought it was just community service, but she started sobbing, clearly feeling partially responsible for not seeing the signs sooner. Her shoulders shook with each breath, and I could see the weight of realization crushing her. I tried to comfort her, but I've always been awkward with emotional stuff. My attempt at a hug just made her cry harder. I've never been good at the whole physical comfort thing. My mom says I've had personal space issues since I was a toddler. Frankie stepped in with tissues and a glass of water, handling the emotional support better than I could. Wilder called Lily again, asking when she'd be home. She couldn't keep lying convincingly, so she told him she was having a girls' night at Frankie's, which bought us until morning. He seemed to accept this excuse, which gave us a small window of time. Owen suggested transferring some of the evidence to a secure cloud storage, but we were afraid of leaving digital traces. If Wilder was tech-savvy enough to have hidden folders, he might be monitoring his accounts for suspicious activity. Owen walked us through using an anonymous email to send encrypted files. Meanwhile, Frankie found a child advocacy center with a 24-hour hotline and called them. She put it on speaker so we could all hear, but after explaining we had evidence of child child exploitation, they put her on hold for over 20 minutes, which drove me absolutely crazy. The hold music was this tinny, repeating melody that seemed to get more irritating with each loop. I started ranting about how the system always fails victims when they need help most. I got louder and louder until Lily literally had to put her hand over my mouth to quiet me down. "The neighbors will hear," she hissed. Frankie's apartment had those paper-thin walls where you could practically hear someone blinking in the next unit. The advocacy center finally answered and gave us instructions on how to report, but explained the process could take days to initiate an investigation. Days. Kids were in danger right now. We needed a more immediate solution. I felt like I was going to explode with frustration. Lily briefly suggested confronting Wilder directly, but we all shut that down immediately. That would be incredibly dangerous. Instead, we decided one of us needed to keep him distracted, while others gathered more evidence. The problem now was where Lily would stay. She couldn't go back to the apartment she shared with Wilder, that much was obvious. Frankie offered her apartment as a safe house, but mentioned her roommate was coming home soon, a roommate who was known for gossiping. Not a good option. I thought about offering my place, but then remembered my roommate Gimli worked with Wilder at their day jobs. Also, not an option. Plus, my apartment was basically a glorified closet with mysterious stains on the carpet that predated my tenancy. We were running low on ideas when Owen called back. He'd spoken with a trusted detective named Leo, who could meet us in the morning. That was something at least. Leo apparently specialized in crimes against children and worked in a different jurisdiction, which might help avoid Wilder's police connections, but we still needed somewhere to stay for the night. We decided on a cheap motel, paying cash to avoid leaving a trail. The first two places we tried were fully booked. Apparently there was some kind of convention in town. The lady at the second motel desk told us it was a regional meeting of model train enthusiasts, which seemed absurdly mundane compared to the nightmare we were dealing with. We ended up at the sketchy Starlight Inn on the edge of town, the kind of place that probably rented rooms by the hour if you asked the right way. The room smelled like cigarettes and cheap air freshener trying to cover up the cigarette smell. I offered to sleep on the floor so Lily and Frankie could take the beds, but honestly, none of us could sleep anyway. We spent the night making a timeline of everything we knew about Wilder. Lily revealed more concerning patterns, how he often volunteered at the community center where elementary school kids had after-school programs, how protective he was of his phone, how he'd get angry if she touched his computer. She described times when he'd disappear for hours and come back with no explanation, or how he had a separate laptop he kept locked in his car. We checked his social media accounts for more evidence, but they were surprisingly minimal and clean. The guy was careful about his public image. Around 2 a.m., Wilder started texting Lily frantically, asking where she really was. She stuck to the girl's night story, and he eventually backed off, though his messages grew increasingly controlling. "Call me as soon as you wake up," his last text read. Frankie suggested Lily break up with him via text right now, but we realized that could trigger him to destroy evidence if he suspected anything. She'd need to act normal until authorities could intervene. I went outside for a cigarette to calm my nerves. Bad habit, I know. Started in high school trying to look cool, and now I'm stuck with an addiction and yellow-tinged fingers. In the motel parking lot, I noticed a car that looked exactly like Wilder's. My heart nearly stopped. It was a black Honda Civic with tinted windows and a small dent in the rear bumper. I rushed back inside in a panic, and we turned off all the lights and peeked through the curtains. False alarm. It was a similar model, but with a different license plate. Our adrenaline crashed after that scare, leaving us exhausted and on edge. Lily found more disturbing content while checking other folders on his phone, but she also discovered something unexpected. Photos of Wilder with an older woman at what looked like therapy sessions. There were intake forms partially visible in one shot, and what appeared to be a counseling office. We wondered if he had sought help at some point. The timestamps showed these were from 2 years ago, but the criminal content was much more recent. Whatever intervention happened had clearly failed. Around 4 a.m., Owen texted that Detective Leo would meet us at 8 a.m. at a diner, but Lily was terrified of leaving Wilder's phone missing for that long. We debated whether she should return it before our meeting. I suggested we transfer critical evidence and then return the phone, but we didn't have the right equipment. Frankie volunteered to find a 24-hour store for supplies. While she was gone, Lily confessed she was worried about her own younger sister's safety. Her sister sometimes stayed at their apartment when their parents were out of town. Talking about this triggered a full-blown panic attack. I had to use my quick check first aid training to help her regulate her breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. Slow down. Honestly, I'd only ever had to use that training once before, when a customer fainted after finding out we were out of their favorite energy drink flavor. This was way more intense. Frankie returned with cables, and we started transferring files. Suddenly, Wilder's phone showed he had remotely logged into his cloud account. The notification popped up on the screen, sending us all into panic mode. We had to disconnect quickly before he could see what we were doing. We managed to save enough evidence before Wilder called again, sounding suspicious about why Lily wasn't responding to his texts. She had to pretend she'd fallen asleep at Frankie's to explain the silence. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it over the phone. The next morning, we met Detective Leo at the Waffle House as planned. He arrived in plain clothes, which immediately made me suspicious. I insisted on seeing identification before we'd discuss anything. Turns out I watched too many crime shows. He was legitimate, and explained he worked in the Crimes Against Children unit. He was a middle-aged guy with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of tired eyes that had clearly seen too much. He warned us that the investigation would be complicated by Wilder's connections and suggested we file the report in the neighboring county. We showed Leo the evidence we'd gathered, but he explained some of it might not be admissible since we accessed the phone without authorization. That's when I learned that finding evidence illegally can sometimes hurt a case more than help it. We needed Lily to provide additional context and testimony. His coffee grew cold as we talked through options, the syrup from his waffle congealing on his plate. Lily agreed to make a statement, but was terrified of retaliation. Leo explained the procedures for getting an emergency protective order. I wanted to stay with Lily throughout the process, but Leo explained that since I wasn't family or her current partner, I had to wait separately while she gave her statement. I hated leaving her alone, but those were the rules. At least Frankie could stay with her as emotional support. While waiting, I struck up a conversation with a social worker named Peter, who worked with abuse victims. He had kind eyes and a gentle voice that seemed at odds with the horrific cases he handled daily. Hearing about the cases he handled made my anxiety spike, and I had to step outside for another cigarette. Peter followed me outside and explained the support systems available for Lily, but he also warned that many victims face backlash from mutual friends. I promised myself I'd stick by her no matter what happened. The autumn air was crisp, and I noticed the leaves were starting to change color. It seemed wrong that the world could be so beautiful while containing such ugliness. Leo finally came out to update me on their plan to obtain a search warrant, but executing it would take time. He suggested I take Lily somewhere safe for at least 24 hours. I called my Aunt Admin, who lived an hour away, to ask if we could stay with her. I couldn't tell her exactly why, so I had to be vague about our emergency situation. Admin has always been the family fixer, the one who shows up with casseroles when someone's sick, or offers her spare bedroom when couples fight. She agreed to host us, but mentioned she was hosting a church group that evening, so we'd need to arrive after 9 p.m. to avoid questions. Before we could go to Admin's, Leo advised Lily to return Wilder's phone to avoid tipping him off. She was terrified of seeing him, so I offered to drop it off while he wasn't home. We drove to Wilder's apartment complex, and I was about to place the phone in his mailbox when the main door opened. I had to pretend to be delivering food to avoid suspicion from the neighbor who was leaving the building. I fumbled with an imaginary delivery bag, nodding awkwardly as they passed. With the phone successfully returned, we headed toward my aunt's house. Halfway there, Lily got a text from Wilder saying he'd found his phone and was coming over to Frankie's to pick her up. We had to warn Frankie immediately. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial her number. Frankie agreed to tell Wilder that Lily had left earlier, but he didn't believe her and started pounding on her door. I could hear the commotion over the phone, his angry voice growing louder, Frankie trying to stay calm. She had to call campus security to get him to leave. We finally arrived at Admin's house, physically and emotionally exhausted. As we pulled into the driveway, Lily received dozens of angry texts from Wilder. The notifications kept coming, one after another, her phone buzzing continuously like an angry bee. We realized he suspected something, and our safe haven might not remain safe for long. Admin greeted us with warm hugs and hot chocolate, asking few questions but clearly concerned. Her house smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry, so normal it almost made me cry. The next morning, Leo called to inform us they had executed the search warrant at Wilder's apartment, but Wilder had already deleted many files from his devices. The investigation hit its first major obstacle. Leo assured us they had tech specialists who could recover deleted files, but the process would take time. We needed to prepare for a lengthy investigation. Lily wanted to return to her apartment to get more clothes, but it was too risky to go there. My aunt offered to take her shopping for essentials. I stayed behind to coordinate with Owen about next steps, but then discovered Wilder had somehow gotten my phone number and started calling repeatedly. Each time my phone rang with an unknown number, my stomach would clench. I had to block his number and change my privacy settings on all my social media accounts. Admin returned with Lily and some new clothes, but she was asking increasingly pointed questions about our situation. She kept giving me these concerned looks that reminded me of when I was a kid, and she caught me trying to hide a broken vase. We decided to tell her a partial truth about Lily leaving an abusive relationship. Admin was sympathetic and offered to let us stay longer, but she was concerned about her address being discovered. She asked her neighbor, a retired security specialist named Joe, to help assess safety measures. Joe was in his 60s with a military buzz cut and a perpetual squint. He suggested basic security improvements for Admin's house, but implementing them would draw attention and possibly alert Wilder to our location. We decided to leave for a motel again despite our limited funds. I checked my bank account to see how long we could afford a motel. My savings were pitiful after years of minimum wage work. After rent, car payments, and my monthly data plan, I had just under $400 to my name. I called Sassy to ask if I could pick up extra shifts once things settled down. She agreed to help with shifts, but mentioned that a man had come into Quick Check asking questions about me. Real intense type, she said. Kept asking when you'd be back. We realized Wilder was actively searching for us. Leo called with news that they'd recovered some files and identified several victims, but the evidence suggested Wilder was part of a larger network. The case was expanding beyond just him. I felt relieved that progress was being made, but then Lily received a group text from mutual friends accusing her of making false allegations. Apparently, Wilder had been telling people she was unstable and making things up because he had tried to break up with her. She broke down, feeling abandoned by people she thought would support her. I tried comforting her by reminding her she was doing the right thing, but my own anxiety about our safety was becoming obvious. I kept checking the locks on the motel door and peering through the curtains every few minutes. She ended up being the one consoling me instead. We received word that Wilder had been brought in for questioning, but was released on his own recognizance within hours. Our fear intensified, knowing he was free and likely angry. The system we were counting on to protect us seemed to be failing at every turn. Leo explained they needed more evidence before they could hold him, but he promised they were monitoring Wilder closely. We had to trust the system despite our growing doubts. We checked into a different motel using cash. This one was even grimier than the last, the kind of place where you're afraid to touch the remote control or walk barefoot on the carpet. As we settled in, Lily received an email from Wilder's mother begging her to stop this madness. We realized his family was rallying to protect him rather than acknowledge his crimes. The email went on about how Wilder was a good boy who was being framed. It was sickening. A week into hiding, our motel money was running dangerously low. I couldn't return to work with Wilder looking for me. I finally swallowed my pride and called my estranged father for financial help. We hadn't spoken much since he left when I was 12. Our conversations over the years had been limited to awkward birthday calls and the occasional Christmas card. My father agreed to send money to help us, but he insisted on knowing exactly what was happening. I had to explain everything, reopening communication we hadn't had in years. To my surprise, he was immediately supportive and didn't question our story for a second. The unexpected support from my father gave me hope, but Lily was receiving increasing harassment online from Wilder's friends. They were posting awful things about her character, calling her crazy and attention-seeking. We had to help her deactivate all her social media accounts. Leo informed us that their investigation had identified 3 minor victims from the photos, but building a case strong enough for prosecution was proving difficult. They needed more than just the photos. They needed testimony and corroborating evidence. We felt the weight of responsibility for these children's justice. I suggested we could contact a local journalist to put pressure on the investigation, but Leo explained that going public could compromise the case. Media attention might spook potential witnesses or alert others in the network to destroy evidence. He strongly advised against it. Lily decided she needed to formally withdraw from her college classes, but doing so required going to campus in person. She couldn't just disappear from her education without consequences. We planned a quick, careful visit during off hours. We arrived at the administration building when it should have been empty, but Wilder's friend spotted us in the parking lot. He was leaving late from some campus event, and his double take when he saw us was unmistakable. We had to abandon the plan and leave immediately. Frustration mounting, I contacted Peter the social worker for advice. He explained that the system often moves slowly in these cases. The legal process was designed to be thorough, not fast. We needed to focus on Lily's safety and healing while justice took its course. Peter connected Lily with a trauma counselor who could meet virtually, but insurance wouldn't cover the sessions. My father unexpectedly offered to pay for her therapy. The therapist helped Lily process her feelings of betrayal and guilt, but each session left her emotionally drained. I started learning basic cooking skills to make comfort food for her recovery days. I'd never been much of a cook. My culinary expertise had previously extended to microwave burritos and cereal. I attempted my first real meal, chicken soup, from scratch. I severely underestimated the cooking time and the amount of salt needed. We ended up ordering pizza at 11 p.m., laughing together for the first time in weeks. That small moment of normalcy gave us hope, but the next morning, Leo called with disturbing news that Wilder had filed a harassment complaint against Lily. It was a classic Darvo move: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. We had to meet with legal aid immediately. The legal aid attorney assured us that Wilder's complaint was a common intimidation tactic, but responding required Lily to appear at a hearing. We had to prepare her for facing him in court. I promised Lily I'd be right beside her in court, but the attorney explained that I might be called as a witness. I couldn't sit with her during the proceedings. Lily practiced her testimony with the attorney, but each rehearsal triggered panic attacks. We developed a grounding technique where she'd recite birthdays I had memorized to calm herself down. Your mom, April 8th, 1975. Your brother, November 23rd, 1999. It actually worked pretty well. The day of the hearing arrived and we got to court early, but security was much stricter than expected. We had to surrender our phones and wait in a packed hallway where Wilder could easily spot us. The courthouse was an old building with high ceilings and echoing hallways that magnified every whispered conversation. I tried creating a buffer between Lily and the crowd, but Wilder's family members kept accidentally bumping into us. His mother gave Lily a glare so intense, I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The court officer had to intervene and separate the parties. Our attorney argued for separate waiting areas, but the request was denied due to space limitations. We retreated to a bathroom until our case was called. When we finally entered the courtroom, Lily walked confidently to her seat, but seeing Wilder for the first time caused her to freeze momentarily. I had to whisper her sister's birthday to help her refocus. May 17th, 2006, I murmured, and she nodded slightly, taking a deep breath. Wilder's attorney portrayed him as the victim of a vindictive ex-girlfriend, but our lawyer presented evidence of the ongoing police investigation. The judge took the matter more seriously than we expected. I was called to testify about the day Lily came to QuickCheck. Wilder's attorney tried twisting my words to suggest we planned to frame him. I had to carefully recount every detail to maintain credibility. The judge seemed sympathetic to our side, But then Wilder's Uncle Frank testified as a character witness in uniform. The courtroom dynamic shifted uncomfortably. Our attorney challenged the appropriateness of Frank testifying in uniform, but the judge allowed it. We watched helplessly as Wilder's image was polished by his uncle's authority. Just as things seemed to be going against us, Detective Leo arrived with newly recovered evidence, but court rules prevented him from introducing it during this hearing. He could only observe supportively from the gallery. The judge ultimately dismissed Wilder's harassment complaint, but also warned Lily against making unsubstantiated claims. We left feeling both relieved and insulted. Outside the courthouse, Leo informed us that they'd identified more victims and built a stronger case, but formal charges would require grand jury approval. We still faced weeks of uncertainty. Lily wanted to call the parents of the identified victims to warn them, but doing so could interfere with the investigation. She had to channel her protective instincts in another way. She decided to anonymously donate her textbook refund money to a child advocacy center, but the small amount felt insignificant against the harm done. She began researching how to become a victim advocate herself. I was proud of Lily's resilience, but my own life remained in limbo as I couldn't return to work. I finally asked my father about working at his landscaping business temporarily. My father agreed to hire me, but the job was in another town 40 miles away. Lily and I faced the difficult decision of whether to separate or relocate together. After a lot of discussion, Lily and I decided to relocate together to my father's town. This meant she'd be further from the investigation, so Leo arranged for her to give a comprehensive recorded statement before we left. My father helped us find a small apartment to share as roommates, but the landlord required employment verification. Lily had to quickly find work in the new town. I started working for my father's landscaping business, but years of convenience store work hadn't prepared me for physical labor. I came home exhausted every day for the first 2 weeks. My hands were covered in blisters, and my back felt like it was permanently bent. But honestly, the physical exhaustion helped keep my mind off everything else. Lily found a job at a local bookstore owned by a woman coincidentally also named Sassy. We took it as a good sign. Adapting to our new life and routines was challenging, so we established Friday night pizza as our tradition to maintain friendship amid stress. After a month in our new town, Leo called with news that the grand jury had indicted Wilder on multiple charges, but he had fled before arrest. A manhunt was underway. The news of Wilder's disappearance terrified us, but our new address wasn't connected to either of us officially. We found some security in our anonymity. Lily's therapist suggested she start journaling about her experience, but revisiting the trauma was overwhelming. She began writing children's stories about protecting boundaries instead. I found unexpected satisfaction in landscaping work, but still felt my life lacked direction. I started taking online classes toward an associate's degree in social services. 2 months into our new life, Leo called with news that Wilder had been apprehended trying to cross the Canadian border. The legal process would be lengthy, and we needed to prepare for a potential trial. The prosecutor wanted both of us to testify, but Lily was finally finding stability in our new town. We negotiated to give video depositions instead of appearing in person. My relationship with my father grew stronger as we worked together, but old tensions occasionally resurfaced. We started having Sunday dinners with ground rules against bringing up the past. Lily's children's stories caught the attention of her bookstore boss, but publishing them would mean going public with her experience. She decided to use a pseudonym to protect her privacy. News broke that 2 other men connected to Wilder's case had been arrested, but one was released due to a technicality. Our faith in the justice system remained fragile. Lily received a letter from one victim's mother, thanking her for coming forward, but reading it triggered her PTSD symptoms. We spent a difficult night where I recited birthdays until she could finally sleep. 6 months after our relocation, we received word that Wilder had accepted a plea deal to avoid trial. The sentence seemed too lenient, but we had to find peace in knowing he would at least be registered as an offender for life. Nearly 2 years have passed since that day Lily burst into QuickCheck and changed both our lives forever. While justice wasn't perfect, Wilder got 8 years with possibility of parole after 5. The investigation ultimately identified 7 victims who received support and therapy they desperately needed. Lily's children's book series about Boundary Bear was picked up by a small publisher, and she uses part of the proceeds to fund therapy for abuse survivors. I completed my associate's degree and now work at a youth center teaching computer literacy to kids who struggle with reading and writing like I once did. I still remember everyone's birthday, still accidentally give myself door-related injuries, and still work on my spelling, but these quirks feel like just parts of me now, not deficiencies. My father and I run a small landscaping business together, and we finally healed much of our past. Lily and I remained roommates for a year before she moved in with her new girlfriend, but we have dinner together every Friday without fail. Sometimes we talk about that day and the horror we uncovered, but more often we talk about the future. When she mentioned starting a support group for loved ones of abuse survivors, I immediately volunteered to help. At night, I sometimes still wake up worried that we didn't do enough, fast enough. But then I remember the thank you letter from that mother, now framed on our wall. Because you were brave enough to act, my child can heal. And I realize that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are just people who remember the important things, like birthdays, and like doing what's right, even when it's hard.